Sweetie, are you listening?
Mary, I've said it once, I'll say it again. I can do two things.
Two things at once, yes, I know. But we really need to talk. And, Joseph?
Yeah?
I need you to listen.
I am listening so hard right now. You can't even imagine how much I'm concentrating on you and the words.
I'm overwhelmed by your concentration. Can you just stop for a second, please?
Mary, I would love to stop for a second, but I can't.
Why not?
We're gonna be married soon, and I just want everything to be perfect.
Joseph, I love your heart. I really do, but not everything has to be perfect, and that's okay because we don't know what life is gonna throw at us,
Right, but I still want a house worthy of you, and to do that, I've got to work, because a man
has got to have a plan.
Have I mentioned that before?
A time or two.
And Mary, I have so many plans for us. This table, this is where we're going to have our meals together, and I've made it big enough for to seat some little ones, for down the road, of course.
About that.
Where did I put that chisel?
Joseph, I need to tell you something. Something unbelievable.
Did I put it in that shelf?
I was visited by an angel.
Yeah?
And he told me that I was highly favored.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt like a dream until he told me something. And the instant he said it, I knew that it was true.
I just used it. I just had it.
Joseph, are you listening to me?
Yeah, that sounds really great.
Joseph.
Got it.
I'm pregnant.
Our reading tonight comes from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 1, verses 18 through 25. Now the birth of Jesus the Messiah took place in this way. When his mother Mary had been engaged to Joseph, but before they lived together, she was found to be with child from the Holy Spirit. Her husband Joseph, being a righteous man and unwilling to expose her to public disgrace, planned to dismiss her quietly. But just when he had resolved to do this, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife, for the child conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will bear a son, and you are to name him Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. All this took place to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet. Look, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall name him Emmanuel, which means God is with us. When Joseph awoke from his sleep, he did as the angel of the Lord commanded him. He took her as his wife, but had no marital relations with her until she had borne a son, and he named him Jesus. This is the word of God for the people of God.
I am charmed by this season, the Advent portion of it. And I often think Advent gets the short shrift of the season. We really like to put the emphasis on Christmas, and sometimes we really miss the subtleties and complexities of the Advent celebration. And that's why we have the Advent brief, and it gives me time to talk about these subtleties in Advent, these paradoxes and ambiguities. And if we allow ourselves to ponder them, I think they really capture our imagination. The thing about Advent is that it's about the future and the past. And the deal is we look to the past to learn about the future. And so every week we light a candle, and the lesson around that candle comes from the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible. And this year it's Isaiah, and those of you who know me know that I'm a really big fan of Isaiah. I like Isaiah's work a lot. I'm sort of an Isaiah guy. And so every week we get these really powerful words asking us to ponder the future. And of course, so often we in the church look at those words spoken 700 years before the birth of Christ, and we tend to say, well, that's him predicting Jesus. And there may be an element of that, but a lot of these things that Isaiah talks about, we're still waiting on. Like on the first Sunday, when we light the first candle, we have that wonderful text. I just love it. When Isaiah says, there'll be a day when swords will be beaten into plowshares and spears into pruning hooks, and nation shall not lift up sword against nation. And I love the last line, neither shall they learn war anymore. And Jesus pops along about 2,000 years ago, 700 years after Isaiah shares those words. And we all know that vision, that hope, that dream is still out there in front of us, in spite of the fact that Jesus has come. We live in a very brutal time. Every time I turn on the TV and look what's happening in Aleppo, I just die inside. It's easy to dismiss Isaiah's vision because we human beings are just never going to get there. But it's a part of our season, it's a part of our celebration, it's part of our expectation that we live into this vision that there will be a day. There'll be a day. And then in the second Sunday of Advent, we light this candle, and Isaiah talks about the time in which the lion shall lie down with the calf, and the wolf with the lamb, and a baby will be playing in the adder's den, and a little child shall lead us all. And so you get all this stuff about humanity and nature, all things somehow or another interconnected and finding a rhythm that allows us all to coexist peaceably, wonderfully, respectfully. And again, we look at the times we live in, and we look out there and we see the ecology, and we see the climate change, and we see all the stuff. I read this article the other day about the 10 species that have become extinct over the last 20 years. And we know that vision that Isaiah proclaims is still out there, dangling in front of us. In spite of the fact that Jesus comes 700 years later and 2,000 years ago. And yet, that vision is so powerful, it's there to capture our sense of imagination and give us hope, even when we may not feel there's reason to have hope. That there will be a day. Then on the third Sunday of Advent, we lit the pink candle. You know, the candle where Mary wanted a girl. I know that's an old joke, but I like telling it. I had a kid in one of my confirmation classes years ago, and she actually made the argument that Jesus was a girl, and he was the first feminist. And we need to reinterpret him in light of that. And I just loved her spunk. And then, of course, my daughter's in that confirmation class, and she sort of bought into that too. And so they were all ganging up on me. But you do that as a man. That there are these desert places in life And I think Isaiah's probably being more metaphorical than he is geographical, although we all know there are desert places in life. And Isaiah says there will be a day when the desert places in our life shall blossom beautifully. And I know that there are desert places in the lives of the human family. I am compelled by my job to hang out in those places a lot. So that vision is still hanging out there, even though Jesus has come. We still deal with desert places. And then today we light this candle, the last candle before we get to the big celebration, the big show. And this year, a phrase jumped out of the Isaiah text that just slapped me around, and I cannot not think about it. When Isaiah says, there will be a day when God will send someone, and this is what slapped me around, who will refuse the good, the evil, and choose the good. Now every 3 years I read this text on this day. But for some reason, I don't know, this would just jump right out at me this year, and I just could not let it go. All month I've been thinking about that. One will come who will refuse the evil and choose the good. And the thing that haunts me about that phrase that Isaiah has projected out there into the future, and that we in the church believe in our heart of hearts, that person that God has sent in the person of Jesus Christ is that one. But the thing that really haunts me about it is for someone to be able to refuse the evil and choose the good, they have to know what the difference between evil and good is. And, you know, we human beings sometimes get confused about that. We don't always know what is the evil and what is the good. And so we have these arguments and debates. And it's very difficult. When I was in seminary, I used to have to take these pastoral care classes and ethics classes. And I remember doing these role-playing that pastoral care professors liked us to do. We all hated it, but we all had to do it. And we always role-play the conversation you have with a parishioner over whether or not that parishioner needs to instruct the doctor to remove the life supports. And we would do this to sort of help us learn how to think through that problem with somebody. And a couple of years after I graduate from seminary, and I'm in a parish, and I get a call to go to St. Rita's Hospital in Lima, Ohio. And there's this whole family in this room. And they just got the word from the doctor. They need a decision whether to remove life supports or not. And so I walk in there and I sit down there and I begin replaying the tapes from my seminary education. Asking the questions, trying to lead a conversation. And then all of a sudden it dawned on me. This wasn't an exercise in the classroom. A real man's life hangs in the balance. Dear old Frank. I always remember Frank. 1 son, 5 daughters. The family was divided. Some wanted to remove the life supports because Dad would not want to live this way. And others wanted to keep the life supports on because as long as there's life, there's hope. And if we remove those life supports, it's like killing Dad. And the debate raged on. And all of a sudden, I remember getting really quiet as I heard the debate rage on. And I got so scared. What is the evil in this conversation? What is the good? Who is right? Who is wrong? Then it got really clever. Cleverness is never a good thing in pastoring. I finally made the statement that if the decision you make is made out of love, it will be a good decision. And that wasn't enough for that family. They wanted the absolute, clear answer. I later learned that one of the reasons why this was such a conflict, and this is the first time, and it's only one of 2 times in my career I've ever heard this. When Frank's wife died several years before he got into the parish, she asked for every heroic medical procedure to be applied for as long as she had. And I've just never heard that. Most people, when they get to the point where the quality of life is bad, will say, hold the blood, you know. But she wanted everything done. And I also learned that Frank decided that that's not what he wanted. But some in the family felt that if Mom wanted that, Dad should have it. We hashed that and hashed that and hashed that. If this one who comes can refuse the evil and know the good, then this one who comes must be able to know with clarity the difference. Wow. That's big. That's huge. Because we don't always have that clarity, that focus. And in fact, some people that do get that clarity and that focus, that sort of sense of moral certainty about things, some of us are a little put off by that. How do they know that? How do they come to the conclusion? So this one who comes, this one who God is sending, is going to be able to refuse the evil and choose the good, which means he's going to have a sense of clarity about that. And that is something that is powerful, because we need clarity. Well, this morning we also have this lesson from Matthew, and we have this whole story about Joseph. And, you know, Joseph is engaged to be married to Mary. And Mary discovers she's pregnant. And so Mary has to have this conversation with Joseph. And you can imagine what this conversation was like. And by every standard, and every rule and every value held in first century Judea, Joseph would have been within his right to send her packing. Now, in the old Revised Standard Version of the Bible, the first Christmas I celebrated with the congregation 41 years ago, I used that to read this text on the fourth Sunday of Advent. And the reason I can remember this very clearly was in the old NRSV translation, it wasn't that Joseph was going to sort of set her aside quietly, as some of the other translations. That translation actually says Joseph sought to divorce her. And this congregation was a King James congregation and was not used to hearing the Revised Standard Language. And when they heard the word divorce in this lesson, some people became unhinged. And they came up to me and they said, "How could that be?" And I had to explain as best I could the culture of the day. The divorce is always wrong. I had to explain to them the best I could the culture of the day. Joseph would never divorce Mary. I had to explain to them the culture of the day. He would have been within his rights to walk away from the law. And St. Matthew says he was going to do that. He was going to do that. But then he has this dream. The angel Gabriel visits him in this dream, and he encounters this really bizarre story. And when he awakes, he comes to the realization that for him to choose to refuse the evil and choose the good would be to go against the values and practices and the rules of the day, and to take her as his wife. And he becomes very clear about that. This mere mortal becomes very clear at this moment in his life what refusing the evil and choosing the good was. And he's not the one God is sending, but the one God has sent is resting inside Mary. And the mere presence of that pregnancy causes Joseph so much unrest that he catches this vision that Isaiah painted 700 years earlier. But just the mere suggestion that God is sending one and that one is near freed Joseph to refuse the evil and choose the good. And at that moment he became clear about that. Such is the power of babies. Michael Johansson, in an interview with Bill Moyers, tells this story. He was the youngest tenured law professor at Harvard in the 1970s when the Watergate scandal broke. And being the youngest tenured professor on the faculty, he had to do what the dean told him to do. And the dean got this crazy idea that since so many of the people that crossed the boundary of the Watergate scandal were lawyers, I don't mean to insult lawyers, I think lawyers are good souls. I have friends who are lawyers, I'm not trying to say that we should, but the dean acknowledged that since so many of the people that crossed the boundaries were lawyers, he felt that they needed to beef up the whole question about how do you teach ethics to law students. And so Michael Johansson, being the youngest tenured professor, got called into the dean's office and told that he had to develop a curriculum that will help law students at Harvard think ethically about their work. Well, he told the Moyers in this interview, he said, well, people that go to Harvard, They go for the jugular. They want to win. They want to get into those big law practices that generate lots and lots of money. And so the idea of talking about acting ethically is not really high on their agenda. And like every other young professor getting started in his field, he wanted to be loved by his students. So it wasn't long that he started teaching these classes. He was teaching these students how to sort of dance around ethics. And he became very popular. And his classes were packed with students, and folks just came to him in droves. Then something happened. His wife had a baby. A baby. Common, ordinary baby. You know, the ones that make messes and cries. You got to take care of them. And one day, he was on the floor playing with his son, this baby. And just delighting in this play. And he looked up at the clock and realized he had to go to class, he had to go teach his class. And as he proceeds to leave, he looks back at his son and his wife. And all of a sudden, he began to think about what he was doing in the classroom. And what kind of world that would leave for this baby. He went to his office, he tore up all of his notes, and he started over. And in the 1990s, when he was giving this interview to Bill Moyers, he had become one of the foremost experts on ethics and law in America. He said, it never would have happened if it weren't for the power of that baby. His own son helped him see with clarity the difference between evil and good, and inspired him to make the choice. There's just something about babies. Even when they're not born yet, there's something about babies. And when God sent us Jesus, He sent the one who will refuse evil and choose the good. And our mere effort at waiting for Him already engages us in what that means. Hope to see you all on Saturday night. We like the Christ kingdom. We get to say Jesus is here. And we get to ponder what it means to have this one in our midst that refuses the evil and sees the good. But if you've been following along in the season of Advent, you're already doing that. And you're already beginning to sense what He brings. I think that's incredibly amazing. Know that you are loved and know that you are a blessing in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.